Hi everyone, Michael here with Plant It All, and for this episode we're going back into the greenhouse. Last episode we got the supply lines set on the recirculating deep water culture, excuse me. And that was a fair amount of work, but now we're going to get to that 3D printed part, these bulkheads. We got to put the drains together, we got to get these seated and watertight. I have tested these before recording, but we're gonna have to see how it goes together. You never quite know when you start really applying lots of water, and in this case, lots of pressure on these joints. I'm pretty sure it's strong enough, I'm hoping, but we're gonna find out together. Okay, here we are. We are going to start some assembly on the drain side. So we already got, there's the supply going into each of the pots with its valves. Now, we're going to be taking my 3D printed 3-inch bulkheads, and we're going to be cementing in a 90-degree street elbow. So this is a PVC piece that has both a socket side and a plug side, I guess. There's probably a better name for that. But the idea here is that this will slide in. We'll cement it with the multi-purpose cement that can handle both the ASA and the PVC bonding together. And then from here, we're going to bond in a little 3-inch piece of PVC, and then this will go into, in some case, well actually 5 of the pots is going to go into a Y that will then send it down to the main reservoir. For this very first pot right here, it's going to go into this. So this is a 90 with a clean out on it. So it'll go in like this. These will get seated totally flush to each other, you'll see as I assemble them. And then down the road, here's that clean out that I can thread out, jam a hose in there, and blow out the whole thing. So, let's get going. I'm going to be nice and liberal here. And get it right up onto that little flange there. Because if all these surfaces bond, you're not going to have leaks. Alright, that's done. Always do both sides. Make sure it's nice and even. And for this, you just slide them in, push it up, give it a little rotate. I just do like a quarter turn, and you're good to go. Now, the orientation of this piece of pipe to this nut doesn't really matter. What is going to matter is what's coming on here for the second bit, because we want to make sure it's pointing the right way. All right, I'm going to get the rest of these done, and then we'll start doing the add-ons. Okay, before I do the last one here, this is worth mentioning. Every surface you glue should really be as clean as possible. So I just keep a paper towel around. These are shop towels, a little more rugged than your typical paper towel. Give it a wipe off, and then you know for sure you don't have to worry about debris getting in your glue section where it maybe could cause a leak. It probably wouldn't, honestly. These are really big surfaces, but I figure it takes like 2 seconds, so why not do something simple to help guarantee that my bond is going to be better. Alright, that's it for the all-purpose cement. Now we're going to go back to the good old-fashioned 2-part primer and glue. That's going to be for all of our PVC sections. I've got a whole bunch of these little pieces here, and we're going to be using it to be either connecting our Ys, so this will be for 5 of the 6 pots, and then this very first one is going to be the cleanout. Alright, so first off, I'm going to get these connector pieces, and this is just a little 3-inch piece of PVC to go between here and here. I'm going to bond it into these pieces, and then once I have this as an assembled unit, that's when I'm going to go back and attach these. The reason for that being is I want to make sure that this orientation is exactly correct, not a little off here or there. And this, attaching this piece, it just doesn't matter. It just needs to go in and be seated all the way down. So Lots of priming and lots of gluing. And I'm going to do this little clean out attachment first. This is a separate bit. So we've got a cap, got a plug, and then it goes into the clean out. If you're going with this kind of design like I am, make sure you take the cap out, because the fumes from the glue can actually bond it or make it kind of gummy, and then you might have a leaking issue. So just take this out, set it on the side. I know there's got to be a plumber out there that's looking at the mess I'm making and it's horrifying them. I'm not a plumber. This is not something that's going to be in the basement of my house. It's in my greenhouse. I'm not really going to sweat it too much. Hold these for a second. If you don't hold them for a little bit, they are going to be inclined to push out, and you really don't want that to happen. But 10 count, and you're good to go. All right, on to the next joint. This one. All right, push it in, little quarter twist, hold it for a count of 10. Okay, well, that's it for our one that's different. Now we got 5 of these to do. Okay, same deal as before. Even the joints I'm not gluing right at this moment, I'm just going to give them a quick little wipe out, and then I'll probably re-wipe them when I actually go to glue them. But I figure it's a good habit to keep everything nice and tidy and clean. Alright, so we are going to be connecting these into this portion here of the Y. And so with the curve, that's going to be flowing back towards the reservoir at the end. Okay, everything's primed. Now we're going to connect them. Still, orientation doesn't count yet because we're not locking into anything else yet. After this step, orientation is going to be a pretty big deal. Alright, glue time.
Eventually.
Okay, last stage, this is where orientation matters. So, as I glued these up, I laid them all with the Y in the same orientation. It's just something I find helps me make sure that when the orientation matters with the next part, I'm always picking them up the same way. I'm a little less likely to goof it up. Okay, so, situating back over here. Our first one is actually going to be this critter. So this is pot number 1, we'll call it. Now, if you look at your PVC, you're going to find hash marks at quarter turns and eighth turns. Same thing here. So we need to come out of the pot like this and then make a left-hand turn so we can go down to where the reservoir is that way. So that means this is the orientation I need. So we'll still prime both sides, get them nice and gooey with the adhesive, and then as we come through, I'm going to make sure that this hash line right here lines up with that one as I do that twist when I'm pushing them together. So I'll probably push them together like this and then pull them into alignment. You got to be ready, you got to be planned, because you only really have it's probably like a 15-second window or so once you start putting these together. And then if you goof it up, you're buying new parts. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to prime everything like before, and then glue, glue, glue right down the line. Now, that's this orientation. When it comes to all the rest of them, I just have to remember that the Y needs to be heading in the direction of where I want the water to go, down to the reservoir. If I were to goof this up, if you look in there, it's probably not going to be the biggest deal. This isn't like I'm putting together a drain system in a household where I'm having to pay attention to, the decline of the pipe and things like that. But that little sweft bit there, so water's flowing this way, that's definitely going to ease flow. So why not pay attention and make use of it? Okay, let's get a priming again. let's get that closed up because it smells awful. And we're going to start gluing up. Okay, so first up, pot number 1, the rest are all the same. So here we're coming here, this way, we're going to go that way, and we're going to be looking for those little hash marks to make our alignment as perfect as possible. So there's not really a lot of cheating once you have all these connected together. Alright, nice and coated. So this is the orientation that we want. So I'm going to bring it out of orientation, push them together, and rotate. And with these bigger fittings, you are definitely going to have to put some pressure in there. Just kind of hold it down, otherwise they are going to push off on you. These are important enough. I would hold them for a little extra time. Okay, let up your pressure, give it a wiggle. That ain't going nowhere. There we go. That is from the pot to the main line, all assembled. I've got a couple more to do. All right, see you in a minute.
Tomorrow for sure.
Okay, last joint. And I'm going to take a little breather from these fumes. Even in the greenhouse with everything open, it's just really unpleasant. All right, there we go. 6 pots, 6 sets of bulkheads, 6 sets of PVC joints. I'm going to give these a little time to set up. I'm going to give myself a breath of fresh air. And the next order of business will be threading these onto the pots with their corresponding nuts, and then cutting down some 3-inch PVC to run from pot to pot to pot, all the way back to the reservoir. Alright, so we've got our buckets and all, and this is all nicely cut and cleaned up the edges so there's no little burrs on there. Next order of business is going to be attaching all of these. Got a whole bunch of them, one for each pot, down here. And you might notice there's a teensy-weensy thing to deal with. So when I built this table, it's just pallets. Got a whole bunch of decent looking pallets. Cut the holes up top, added a little stabilization. You can see it running down there. That'll take care of the water weight. But if I'm going to be connecting all of these little ports here, they're going to lead back to the reservoir, which you can just barely make out back there. We're going to need to remove a little extra material. So we're going to get to that, and then we're going to talk about gaskets here, because no matter how good this thread is that I made, we're going to have to make sure that on the outside we don't have any water leaking out on this edge. So for that, we're going to make some homemade gaskets here out of neoprene sheet. So let's get to those, making those gaps for the drain line now. Okay, so here's the drain, and remember, glued those on there so that's nice and watertight on the inside. But we got to be able to let's try that again. Got to get this attached, and in various places we got a bit of wood that's sitting in the way, and we are going to be running that drain. Even if you kind of just imagine it in place here, there's going to be a little bit of interference from some cross members. So the nice thing about using the pallets is that's the support right there going up top. So if we have to cut through these, or we might even have to nip the top of some of those in between ones, I don't think we're going to compromise things too much. We still have bits going horizontal, so that's going to take care of any sway kind of, if we go front to back. And there is definitely enough support running across the back, so we don't have to worry about things kind of getting a little loose the other direction either.
Every setup, if you're doing these kind of DIY tables, is going to be different. And that's why I just cut the holes, put in a little bit of support, and then decided as I assemble in each of these drain bits, that's when I'm going to open things up. So I'm only removing really as much wood as I absolutely have to, and hopefully reducing my work. So let's get at it. Okay, so one chunk of wood removed, and that fits in, well, like a dream, actually. That work fits really great. And it gives me a pretty clear idea where that pipe is going to have to go. So I'm just going to keep going one by one straight down the line, take out whatever I need, double check the strength, and then down the road too, if I'm finding that something's just a little bit too tight or a little too loose, or maybe once all the water's in here, notice there's a little bow and maybe these supports weren't enough, I have plenty of wood to attach to shore this up from a weight perspective. So just gonna keep chipping away at it. Alright, all the wood's cut. Now we got to deal with our gaskets. What we got here, this is neoprene foam. Let's see here, looks like I got 1/4 inch thick, a good amount of compression. Neoprene is a closed cell foam, so if you get it in place nice and flat on both surfaces, it's not going to want to let water pass. This product has a sticky side to it, so what we're going to do is cut a square of it that'll cover the hole and all the space that the gasket ring would cover. So this will actually be on the inside, and it'll compress as this goes in, and then the nut tightens down on the other side. Then we'll feed these all back into place, and we should be ready to go down to the reservoir. But since we are adhering these, I like wiping stuff down with a little isopropyl alcohol. Make sure this is super clean, because any gunk that's on this surface will prevent a good bond with the gasket material. And a number of these are recycled buckets, so actually all of them are recycled buckets. Some are real dirty, some not so bad. Anyhow, they're getting a cleaning. Alrighty. Okay, so in terms of how to big cut this, I'm just going to honestly go with the nut. The nut has the exact same footprint as the actual drain piece, the bulkhead on the other side. So we're not going to be able to do too wide, but if I stagger these kind of zigzag wise with the cutouts, I'll get the most for my mile out of it, and should do the job. So let's get trimming. So neoprene's pretty soft stuff, real squishy. So you don't gotta get fancy with this. I'm just using a regular pair of scissors and just kind of impressing on it the outline. And it's no problem with overshooting. You just definitely don't want to undershoot, because that could really screw up the pressure. So part of using a gasket is you want to make sure that the gasket itself has even pressure from whatever you're squishing in there. So I'll show you in a second here. This is a pretty good illustration of it if you're cutting your own gaskets like I am. This will work all day long because the gasket's coming out. I could have come a lot closer, but if I had one edge, say I trimmed this so that one edge was a bit short, there is a reasonable chance that there'll be uneven pressure here, which would actually cause this end to lift because there's not as much resistance with no gasket under there. And so you could potentially end up with a leak on either side. So if you are cutting your own gaskets, just try your best to either get it exactly right, or I prefer just to err on the side of caution here. All right, peel and stick time. All right, I mean, no real awards here. This is grade school type skills. So peel off your backer. If your backer falls apart like this, just keep working your way around. If you end up with a little scrap of the paper in there somewhere and you get an uneven seal down to your surface, it might cause you problems. It might not. Just keep it as clean as you can. Then right over your hole, and you can easily tell where the hole's at just by pushing down a little bit. Make sure the edge right on the The opening is what's really secured first. The rest of it's kind of gravy to a certain extent. And then, when it comes to cutting it, I just use a regular old knife, none special. Probably a little sharper than this one wouldn't be a bad idea. And what I'll do is I'll cut an X. And then that just makes it a little bit easier to get the trim around the edges. Now, this is one of those places, again, where if you can get it real exact, that's perfect. If it ain't perfect, it's still going to work. But if you are using a particularly sharp knife, try your best not to violate the plastic of the bucket. Because if you cut a little ridge into it, that can be a source for a leak to work up later on. Now, obviously that is not a perfect circle, but when I stick my finger in there, I can feel that it is right on the edge of the plastic, and I'm not going to have scraps pushing in that might get stuck in my threads and cause a problem. And I haven't cut into the plastic at all. It's nice and smooth. If you did make a mistake and cut into the plastic, you can heat it up with a heat gun and kind of mush it back a little bit. Just be careful of the neoprene, so maybe heat from the inside of the bucket. All right, let's get that first piece of drain on there. There she is. Pretty good fit. The nut, so if you're printing my files here, one side will have a flat edge, the other side will have a taper or a chamfer to it. This is, well, both sides will thread on, but this side's much easier because the chamfer is actually designed into the thread as well, so it'll just go on a whole lot easier. Just reach in, give it a couple spins to get it going. Make sure you're threaded on there. It should go very easy. If you're getting resistance at all, you're probably cross-threading a little. Back it off, go again. Because 3D printed parts are amazing, but they're not as strong as injection molded plastic. There's just no two ways about it. And so if you over torque it or you cross thread it badly, you may have pooched the whole part. So a little bit of patience with yourself here. And okay, I've got it pretty tight, but you can see a little bit of force, I can still make this shift. Tightening it down will happen once everything is totally done. It's going to take a mighty big wrench, or in my case, I'm just going to go in with a strap wrench and pull it around. But it's not going to take a ton of pressure to make this watertight, because you can see here, the foam gasket has already started to buckle in, and this is basically a zero pressure system. We're not dealing with pressurized water in any way. This is flowing back and going to the reservoir. So this seal can be complete without it being dead tight. Now we got, what, 5 more to do plus the reservoir. Okay, back to work. Okay, here we are. Got everybody connected. Haven't connected into the reservoir yet, but that's actually kind of important because to make sure everything's lined up properly, we have to figure out the distance from here to here. So once you've got everything connected and hanging down there, get them all at least approximately level to each other. Then what you want to do, set down the camera here. You see how each of these have the flange? That's as far as the connecting piece of PVC can go. So to figure out how much you need from here to here to get a good seal, take a tape measure and measure from flange to flange. So if you go to the back little shoulder up to the other shoulder, that's 14 inches in this case. And I went in to the garage and cut me a 14-inch piece of PVC. And if you line it up there, see, looks pretty good. A little bit of an overhang on this side, so I need to check my level, and that'll fit just right. But if you want to be on the safe side, you can short this a little bit. So I may go in, since this is looking dead on, I'm going to take probably a 1/4 inch off here, so I got a little bit of wiggle room, and I don't end up with kind of like a wobbly drain as I go section to section. So I'm going to trim that off and then glue it in, and then move on to the next one. All right, just like before, make sure you prime all your surfaces before you glue them. You really don't want to end up with little leaks. Gotta get them both. Mine's not always the tidiest job, but it'll definitely stay put. All right, here comes our glue. Remember, time is fleeting on this one, so get really good layers in there. Make sure you're coating all your surfaces, pipe and fitting. Let's get a little more in here. And then when you seat it, make sure you give it a twist. And that little twist is just to ensure that even though you did a good job brushing things around here, that you've got glue on every surface and it's all inserted pretty well. All right. Whoop. Try not to knock over the camera at the same time. Because these are so close, it's going to take a little finagling. Alright, well, I couldn't quite hug around the camera and do that at the same time, so I had to move the camera, but there we go. Joint number 1 done. Got a couple more to do. Alright, I'll see you when this is all set. So, there we go. That is the return drain line all the way into the reservoir. Ooh, get my finger out of there. So, next up will be plumbing the pump up to the supply line and then water testing everything. Make sure there's no leaks, because even though all this is glued together, and we've got, you know, little ziggity-zag going on there and lots of joints, you can seal them from the outside safely because this is a zero pressure kind of system. We have pressure, positive pressure coming up on the supply, but the return is basically zero pressure. So we can patch from the outside if we have to, but I am going to let all this dry for about 24 hours and then I'm going to water test it. There we go. Next steps are coming up. All right, and poof, we're back. I took care of a couple boring bits, so cleaned out, well, I need to clean again, to tell you the truth, but we've got our pump that was just hanging out on the bottom there. It is up here with a connection right into our supply line, and then float valve. So these, if you've never fiddled with them before, have a little adjustable bit here and then a air bladder. So depending on where you set the air bladder, when this floats with the top surface of your water level, it'll shut off the flow. When it goes down low, it drops, and then the water is going to flow. Now, we have the height of these basins to be concerned about, because we need airspace for the roots and then have them dangle in the water. Without that airspace, it's harder for the roots to get oxygen. So, as we water test all of this, we're going to let it start filling. And then when we see the level we want in the basins for the actual plants, that's how we will set the height of this. Now, it doesn't move very far, but when you loosen this knob, you can make it hang down. So really you have, that's probably about 8 inches from the lip here based on how I've mounted it. So if it was there, when the water level comes to about here, it'll push it up and then it'll turn it off. If I want a little higher, just tip it up. Same thing. So the throw, the distance that this little hinge bit here moves is relatively limited, but this bladder can be adjusted quite a bit, and that will set the height of this basin in terms of how full we let the water get, and that will be reflected in every single one of the pots that the plants will be in. So it's just time to start filling it up with water, and this is going to take a while. Alright, so first water test here. So far no leaks, and with each of these valves here I'm able to adjust the approximate flow. So I just decided I'm going to go with where it falls, not so much volume. So I'm trying to get the water for each of these spigots so it's falling right at the seam there where my bulkhead and my PVC are mated. So you can see it's pretty much the same. I'm not looking for perfection, but if they're pretty darn close, so that one could use a little more pressure there, all I have to do is open or close the valve. So in this case, I'm closing it. It was full open. It's not going to help. But if I partially close one of the ones further down, more water will be supplied this way. So let's see, I'll shut this one down a little bit. And now we're closer. So each valve is at a slightly different position. It's gained just enough pressure. And then now I just have to finish testing the drains, so the return that goes underneath here, or that guy. And then make sure there's no leaks. If there's no leaks, now this is just hose water, then I'll flood the system with roadie water. But so far, so good. Awesome. Okay, so far so good with the pump, but I'm not getting quite as much pressure as I would like, and it's running full open. So I'm going to swap in a different pump here, a lot bigger. This one has a variable controller on it though, so just need to get my right fitting, and now I'm going to replace, well, this pump for that one. But I thought this would be a good chance to show off a piece of kit that a lot of people don't own. It can get very inexpensive now on Amazon, and it makes your life with vinyl hosing and stuff much, much easier. So this is a tube expander. It's designed for PEX, so you know, that plastic plumbing instead of copper in homes. But the idea is the same. You put a fitting on the end of this, stretch out your hose or your PEX pipe, and then these plastics will go back to the original size. Now, if you're using PEX, there's actually a collar you have to put on to reinforce it. In the case of vinyl hosing like this, you don't got to worry about that. But it does make your life easier. So here's the business end here. And it is just, it's a little cone that pumps in and out. What you need to do is attach the correct head to it. So you open her up all the way. Now mind you, some of these may assemble differently, but the ones I've seen are all the same. This is a notably less fancy one. Some of them are ratcheting, so what would happen is every time you pump it, it holds it at that position, you pull it back and you can pump it again to push it more and more open. This one is just a one go. So this is all the way closed, or the handle is all the way closed, so it's at its most expanded. You open it back up and it's its most narrow. This kit came with five different heads, all for different hose diameters. So let me unplug pump A. It's fine, it's just not doing what I want it to. Set that over there. This kit came with a really, really cheap pair of cutters, but it does work well. And it fits right in the case, so I just keep it there. They are nothing special at all. You can probably tell by looking at the handle. It's, you know, but you know, whatever, it works. And I had left my whole hose length on here. Really, really don't need that, but I just want to approximate it, so I'm gonna cut it off here. That part's easy. So let's get the old pump out of the way. Let her drain on the floor before I pack her away for a different project one day, probably. Who knows? Maybe later this week. Put the snips away here. All right, and here is the pump I'm swapping in, notably larger by water volume. This one can go up to 18,000, really? No, sorry, 1,800. I completely misread. 1,800 gallons per minute. That did not sound right. The one I was running before was just under 400. But we got to get onto the spur fitting. So, other ways you can do this: warm it up with a heat gun, shove it on. But you can see, I mean, that's what you want, but that's going to be really hard, especially if it's been sitting in cold water. So, I'm just going to take the fitting off the pump so I'm not handling it all at once. All right, so here's the fitting. Just leave it right there. Open up the tool so it's at its most narrow. Stick it in there and just give it a good stretch. Now in this case, this particular head's very, very close to what I need, so my plan was stretch it a little bit, then put the next fitting on. So here's our starter one. I'm going to go up one size. to this one. So thread her on. That stretch will stay for a little bit, not a super long time. So you can see there's a little bit of a flare left to it. All right, so we get that on there. And you can progressively push in. That's what I like to do. I get right up to the shoulder here by that spring. Just hold it there for a second. Line it up. That'll probably go on quite nicely. And then just be a little quick about this next part. But, oh, it looks like I might need, you know what? I think one more size up will be to my benefit. So let me get the next size up. In truth, now that I think of it, probably could have skipped the red one there. Now we're on to orange. Oh yeah, look at that. All right, so give her a couple of stretches, go a little further. Now if this was PEX, it would actually hold the stretch size a little bit longer because it's a more rigid plastic. With the vinyl, you can see that it's already going back. But as long as you can get a couple spurs on there, like that, probably want to go a little bit further if I can, but pretty darn close. So it's really a matter of getting this one in further, a little bit more stretch. And I could go up one more size. I don't think that's going to be necessary, but we'll see. All right, nicely stretched out there. There you go. That's exactly what we want. Got the washer here. Let's get that new pump in place. Washer's in there. I know I just put it on, but I always like to double check. When you don't, that's when you have to go back fishing around the cold water for it. Okay, nice and tight. This one did pretty much to exactly where I wanted it. Yeah, it's in right in the middle there. And now here's the controller. Nothing fancy. Up and down. This is feed like a temporary pause. So if you're using this in a pond or in a particularly large aquarium setup, that would be your feeding pause as well as your power button. But we'll just be controlling speed here. So this will go off to the side after I attach the power coupling. This does have a nice waterproof seat there. So as this collar comes up, you don't have to be real concerned about where the cord is. And it does come with a nice big piece of double stick tape, foam tape that I'm going to put on the back once I dry that off. But that'll go right up onto the left here where the rest of my controllers are. Now this is a 24 volt, so if you were already working with 24 volt DC in your setup somewhere else, you can just plug directly into it. But here we go. And it's starting to prime. Let's take a look at that output. Oh yeah. That's notably more. And a lot of these pumps will actually start at their 50% point. So you got like really great output here, a little bit less here. So again, that's why each of these have their own valve. There we go. Look at that. We're playing right in the middle, right in the middle. Got the peak here, right in the middle, right in the middle pretty much. Great. And now I can come back around this way. The controller's on the ground. And I just knocked out the power line. Get that plugged back in there. Alright, and there we go. We're up to full speed. We can dial it down as we need, back to half. And we've got all the output we could possibly want. So later on, if I were to turn this whole table into just hydro instead of got my seedlings for my vegetable garden starting over there, I could crank this up. I've got about 50% volume in terms of pump pressure left. and I've got sufficient power or output down that way, so looks like in good shape there. All right, so the system's nice and dry, but I realized I missed an opportunity here. So I put in this threaded plug on the system. It's the lowest point, so if you look down there towards the reservoir, this is the perfect place when between grows to pop that cap off and, you know, give it a good blast out with the hose. But that means all the water's going right down there. So I put together this. Now this thread matches this opening, and then I've made it in a hose bib. So when I go to clean out the system, I can first attach a hose down here, drain the system wherever I'd like the water to go, then unthread this and clean out the drain line. So let's get that attached. Alright, so I've got pretty much everything drained out. There might be a little bit here, but let's just go in, loosen that a little bit. And nice thing about using pipe dope on your threads is once you get it loosened, you can do it all by hand at that point. So we've got our new connection with that hose bib on it. That's going to need a little pipe dope just to make sure the threads really do seal well. You don't need a ton, but you do want to make sure that your threads are full all the way around, because then this can squish out as you thread in, and you don't have to really get it super tight. You just have to get it basically hand tight. All right, a little bit further, get this hose bib facing downward a little bit more. This wrench is not quite the exact size, but even if I can't get it tightened down further, this would still work. Yeah, all right, you know what, I'm going to leave it right there. It's pointed down. That'll still serve the same purpose. I'll get my strap wrench in here later and get this all the way down. These pliers here, these channel locks, just aren't quite big enough for the job, and I don't want to start destroying stuff. So, but that's it. Draining the system is going to be as easy as attaching a hose here, sticking it wherever I'd like it to go, and then opening up the hose bib. Then when it's done, thread this whole thing off. I can blast out the entire drain line and make things super clean for the next grow. Well, let's keep going. So here we are. We are just about ready to reflood the system. I've got the feed line here attached to my little float switch. This is still set at a guesstimate water height. I think it's actually going to need to go a little bit higher. But since running filtered water out of your hose going around roadie system over there, I got to tidy all that up. That's a bit of a mess. But since all of this running water from your roadie all the way down into your reservoir takes time, I'm going to stay on the shallow side. I can always adjust this nut, lift it higher, and then have a higher level in all of my buckets there. All right, let's get it flowing. Well, there you go. There's not really a whole lot to see. This is just going to take its sweet time filling up the system. This bucket here is 45 gallons. I think I'm filling it up to about just south of 40, actually. And then each of these, even though they're 5-gallon buckets, they will be holding about 3.5 to 4, depending on what I eventually settle on. So this is going to take quite a while. Once I am well over the height of the intake of my pump, and this is a fairly big one, then I'll turn the circulator on. Not because I've got plants going down here, but if you don't get your circulating pump going and filling your buckets down the line, then this will get to the point where it floats and turns off, and you won't have enough water in your buckets. So you let this go, do its thing. Once it's either full or at least well above the intake of your pump here, then you turn your cycling pump off. It's going to send water down the line. You're going to start filling up those plant buckets, and then your float valve can keep topping up your reservoir. All right, well, we're going to give this some time, and we'll be back.
Well, there you have it. 3D printed parts in. I think we're in good shape. So remember, check out the new webpage, plantitall.com. If you would like to, please feel free to download these files. And if you're enjoying them, I would appreciate you buying me a coffee through the link on the webpage, or even just using the links that are in the descriptions and across the webpage for your purchases. I get a little bit of a commission from it, and it makes it a lot easier to start creating more and more content. Well, I hope you're having fun, staying safe, and enjoying what you're doing, but make sure that you always plant it all.